On today's podcast, our guest is Suzan Koc. Suzan has a long and varied history in music publishing, both domestically and internationally. She's worked in Europe, she's worked here, she also works with a lot of independent songwriters. A lot of people rely on her to put conferences and song camps together. She has a lot of very, very great insights in our conversation that were revealed about what people look for, how your social skills as a person are really, really important if you are serious about building a career as a successful songwriter. We talked about what people look for in the publishing world, how the criteria and the standards have changed. We look at that and a lot more, so you don't want to miss it. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sat down with veteran music publisher and songwriter consultant Suzan Koc, where we discuss what are some of the foundational elements songwriters should be aware of if they're going to pursue a career in songwriting, as well as the specific non-creative qualities, traits or characteristics that great songwriters possess, how important social skills are for songwriters who want a career as a professional songwriter, and much more. You won't want to miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders, are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source, serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. When you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured interview is with music publisher and songwriter consultant Suzan Koc. I've known Suzan for many years. She is a wonderful songwriting advocate who, she's worked in both Europe and in the United States. She worked for Hit and Run Songs. She's worked for BMG. She now teaches songwriting. She now teaches music publishing at MI, and she's been a close colleague of mine at the school for a long time. Very bright woman who really understands the whole nature of publishing, and more importantly, the nature of songwriters, because she works with them. As you remember, our discussion about how the art of songwriting has evolved over the last 10 years was such an interesting point.
Yeah.
And the other thing I thought was so interesting is how important social skills are for someone who wants to have a career as a professional songwriter today. And the other thing that I thought was so interesting was how the emphasis today being so much on the hit single, how she, when we discussed this about how it makes songwriters a little more cautious as to who they actually collaborate with.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the points that I thought were really interesting were, the foundational things that songwriters should be doing now in terms of their career. Also, we asked, I think, some of the innovative things that, that she sees that songwriters are doing to get their songs placed, whether it's on film or television. Interestingly, talking about how publishing deals with songwriters are changing, the admin versus the co-pub deals. So I thought that those are very interesting points.
Absolutely. It's a changing market out there. And one of the reasons it's changing is because songwriters are becoming much more knowledgeable and accountable about their own careers. And there are far more options out there for people. Companies like Cobalt, companies like BMG that are doing those kinds of admin deals, and buying up other companies like, that are doing that. So yeah, there is a whole changing nature around, publishing, and we'll, talk about that probably in future episodes. I mean, I look at like what Mirk Mercuriadis is doing and how he's transforming the whole element around publishing, with regards to his model and what exactly is a publisher today. It used to be someone who just owned the rights in a song, and now, they're transforming that whole world.
Insiders, sit back and relax and enjoy our featured episode with Suzan Koc.
Welcome, Suzan, and thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Ritch.
You have such a long history with songwriters and in music publishing throughout your career. I'm curious, how has the art of songwriting evolved over the last 10 years?
Well, obviously, over the last 10 years or over the last centuries, the art, it's ever-changing because it's art. That's the whole purpose of art, is that you're creating new things, and when there's creation, there's change. So a lot of the arc has changed, as in big influence of hip-hop. That's not just the 10 years, that's the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. Obviously, computers and beats and technology and this new instrument has changed the way people write songs. The market has changed the way people write songs. With the album format disappearing, nobody's looking for that great ones like the album cut that made an album. Almost like a bridge makes a song, because nobody's really listening to it. Everything became more single-driven, more immediate. So that has changed. But again, it's going to change again. And I'm not saying it's going to go backwards to what it was. It's going to become something that we don't even suspect.
Suzan, hi, this is Eric. Thanks so much for doing this for us. For new songwriters who are serious about building a career, as a professional songwriter, what are some of the most foundational things, you feel that they need to know and be doing? That's
the million-dollar question. How do I write that hit song? I think the main thing is for writers to find their own voice, both musically and lyrically. And the tendency for new songwriters is to mimic. And it's a great way of learning to mimic. To look at how people did it before them is very important. It helps the songwriter to have context in where the music's at, what is being made today. But eventually they need to set themselves apart by saying it as they see it.
Right.
So they can have a unique point of view.
What do you feel are some of the most common professional mistakes that you see inexperienced writers making?
What do you mean by professional mistake?
Well, what I mean by that is, I guess, things that are detrimental to their career.
Well, first, like from the beginning, is not to have split sheets when they write a song. That's like you finish writing a song, document it. Go register with a performing right organization such as ASCAP BMI and register those songs. It's basically having a baby. You need the birth certificate. That's what those registrations are. It's the birth certificate. That is the basic thing. Once you've made a recording, not to put the metadata on. The metadata is the encryption on the MP3 that says who owns the master, who are the artists, who are the songwriters, who are the publishers, where to get in touch with you. So these are the main mistakes, and they cost a lot of money.
I was reading an article recently that was talking about top songwriters, on major albums with major hits have this problem. And like what you just said reminded me of that, where you said it costs major money, where, in the future, you're not going to get paid if your metadata isn't in proper order. You're just not.
Well, I don't know how much you followed the Music Modernization Act and all that's happening. And there was a big fight about the new mechanical licensing collective.
The MLC,
MMA and the MLC that's being formed.
Right around
and
that.
One of the big point of conversation between publishers and songwriters were that right now at Harry Fox there's, I think, a $200 million of money collected that they can't distribute.
Right.
Because of improper data.
Because of the proper data. So publishers are saying, let's treat it like any black box money and pay it according to market share. And songwriters are saying no, because if these were major artists and songwriters, the metadata would probably be in place. So this money probably belongs to independent artists.
Yep. Exactly.
So anyway, I'm not sure how it's going to get resolved, but the truth is, out of those $200 million, maybe 10,000 belongs to a songwriter for who that 10,000 could be life-changing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's their own fault. It's ignorance, but in today's market, there's no reason to be ignorant.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do see this as a issue where, Eric and I are very, very adamant about the level of education that artists and songwriters need today. You and I, Suzan, are on the front lines of education, and it is something that I feel songwriters today, artists today, the days of someone else will handle that in my career are rapidly coming to an end. And now what you just articulated about the MMA, people are really starting to feel an economic consequence to that level of ignorance. And it's just not acceptable anymore moving forward.
No. And I mean, they're doing it to themselves. And I know a lot of people put music halfway believing that it's going to happen or not. But that's also the other big mistake, is if you don't believe in you, then why are you even doing it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I love the way you had the analogy of the songwriter splits as being like the blueprints, the birth certificate. I love the way that you put that. I've never heard it put in such a way, so that's really great. Let me ask you, Suzan, in your experience, are there specific non-creative qualities, traits or characteristics that great songwriters possess?
Of course, because you need to have social skills to be able to put all your fears aside and pick up the phone and call, send the song, email, follow up, and find that right balance between being business savvy, following up, and not overwhelming the person. Being able to take a deep breath, and when somebody says your song's not good, to be able to look at it and say if they're right or wrong in the merit of the song, not because it hurt your feelings or didn't hurt your feelings. You don't want to take everybody's feedback. Like if somebody says your song's not good, you don't want to trash the song either. You want to take a second look at it. It's really getting that balance, and also crossing your T's. You want to set one day aside a week to register your songs, to go and find out what movies are in post-production, what supervisors looking for what, going to events, finding out what events are coming next. Because this is unfortunately, we're at an era that if you're not doing it for yourself, nobody's going to want to do it because everybody's looking for business partners. So you are not just a talent that is being signed, you're also a partner.
Right.
Yeah, very, very much so. And, it's interesting in hearing you say that, Suzan, is that so many of those opportunities exist today. So many of those kinds of events, whether it's an evening with ASCAP or with BMI or with CSAC or with, the different organizations that are out there for networking, or songwriting organizations that can help put people together, or different events. It's far, far more extensive than it ever was. And, it's like the information sources. I'm always telling the students where we teach, please value them. This is what's going to move your career forward.
Absolutely. And for young songwriters, there's a fantastic organization called SONA. Their website is wearesona.com, where they are activists. They were very instrumental in getting the MMA passed. They're lobbyists. A lot of the top songwriters are members. They're still lobbying for different things. They have events all the time. There are several levels of membership, and I think you can, like, the basic level of getting in is $25. It's not really prohibitive. You can go and rub elbows with other songwriters, find out and get into a community, ask questions, and volunteer, and be part of just start knowing people and acting like a professional songwriter, that this is your profession, not your hobby.
So, Suzan, what are some of the more, innovative things that you see today that songwriters do to get their songs recorded or placed?
Well, there are a lot of places they can go and meet people. ASCAP Expo, Taxi Rally, these are communities, you can go and meet people. To be recorded and placed, honestly, everybody have their own TV channel in YouTube where they can post and get their audience. So if you're a songwriter and not an artist and you want to get your songs placed, the major artists are going to be a long shot. But you can look at all these artists who post covers. Some of them are really good and they don't write their own songs. So you can get in touch with them and say, hey, I love your voice. Are you looking for originals? I'm a songwriter. Check out what I do. And start doing it and trusting your own ears, trusting your own gut, and going forward with things.
Let me ask you, just as a quick follow-up to that, how important are social skills for songwriters who want a career as a professional writer?
Very important. You need to be able to go and meet people. You need to be able to put your ego aside and send songs out. You need to be able to hear somebody say your song's not good or your song's not right for the project, and be able to hear the difference between your song's not good and your song's not right. And get on a schedule of calling people, emailing them, asking them without harassing them, and keep a nice balance of what do you need? How can I help you? You are looking for songs. I have songs. Maybe there's something we can do. And there are a lot of resources where you can go and meet people.
Yeah, you were mentioning like the ASCAP Expo. You mentioned, I think, Sona.
ASCAP Expo, Sona. They have events. I was at an event last night. There are a lot of volunteering work that can be done at Sona. They have a lot of events everybody's always invited to. I think the ground level entry is $25 to become a member. They are activists. They do a lot of things. A lot of the top songwriters are part of it. Go meet them. These are people you can ask questions to. And be part of a community is very important.
Definitely. And yeah, we'll post all those links in the show notes. Let me ask you, Suzan, how do you feel, is music publishing in a healthy place today?
I don't know. That's such a loaded question. What healthy for who?
Well, I guess healthy for, in general, and I guess for the artists.
So, listen, music publishing has always been a little polarizing business. People say, oh, you're banks, you don't do things. The truth is, music publishers are necessary because they are there to collect your money. And there are more and more complicated ways in which your songs are exploited. With the digital, it got multimedia. There are monies from more sources coming in. And a lot of the songwriters without a publisher aren't collecting as much. So yes, getting a publisher, if you're having success, is good. Either it's an administrator or like a co-publisher or a publisher. It is a healthy place. But if you are a budding songwriter and you're looking for a publishing deal, it's gonna be hard. It's going to be hard unless you're already connected, unless you're already writing with established songwriters. You have a heavy-duty manager. And again, in publishing, I also want to differentiate music libraries from conventional publishers. Music libraries are geared toward film and TV, and they're still looking for songs to sign and acquire, whereas major publishers, they're a little more picky because most executives don't have 5 years on their contract, and that's how much it takes to develop a writer.
It's interesting hearing you speak about that. It's I guess it reminds me of the fact that today the criteria seems to be totally different. I mean, would you agree that publishers today expect a certain level of development or prior success from a new or unknown songwriter before they have serious interest in wanting to work with them?
Of course. We had, when I started in the business, I started in '89, so it goes a while. All through the '90s, you could sign a good songwriter, somebody who's solid, and they write really good songs, like Shelley Pike and Hit and Run's relationship. She was a solid, good songwriter. For 10 years, we were able to give her significant advances and recoup those advances off of album cuts, because an album sold between 500,000 to 10 million, and a regular sale of a successful album was 2-3 million. So we could make money off of songs that never made it to the radio. So you could sign because there was more need for songs. People were looking for 12 songs per album. You could place songs. You got one that's co-written, and also at the time there were rarely more than 2 or 3 co-writers on the song. So there was income stream. So yes, we didn't need anybody to have a song in the charts before we signed them, because we knew that we could act on it. In today's market, one, you're not a single, you don't make money. Even a Demi Lovato album cut is not a lucrative. It's good to get the next cut. It's good for the ego, but it's not changing anybody's life. I know people who put their kids through school with one Celine Dion album cut. So the money flow dried out. So, of course, you can't sign the same way. It would be business-wise foolish to do that.
Right. Let me ask you, Suzan, leading into that question, how are the publishing deals with songwriters changing today? Admin versus full publishing deals or co-publishing deals?
I don't think they're changing much. Because you always have people who supply demand. There are a lot of admin deals. TuneCore is doing great with all the self-published and self-recorded artists who get their songs on digital platforms. Cobalt's thriving. But all the other publishers are also, because there's so few deals being handed, the publishers get to pick. So they do offer deals that are co-pub publishing. That doesn't change much.
Well, how about the Cobalt model seems to be, aggressive, marketing and collection versus, signing copyright or owning copyright. What's your sense on that? Is that a new trend in some of these new companies rather than traditional?
Well, it's
publishing?
not a new trend. The admin started in the '90s with bug music. It's whenever there are self-contained artists, there is always a publisher who's going to say, hey, why don't you keep your publishing, and I want a piece of your income, and you can keep your copyrights. Here's the thing. It's a good model, but eventually Cobalt did buy songs, and they did want to be in the copyright ownership business.
Yeah.
Because
very
otherwise
so.
you don't own real estate. And if you're in the real estate game, at one point you want to own real estate.
Let me ask you, Suzan, with publishers today, is it more prevalent? Are collaborations more prevalent with publishers, co-writing, or is it pitching, or is it a combination of both today in terms of the work?
Listen, the pitching has dried out a long time ago. The way publishers pitch songs is really by setting co-writes up with the artist. One of the main reasons being is that a lot of the artists are signed to production deals with producers. So they're only looking for that big fat song. So getting into collaborations are a better way of landing on that EP or album. If you have that one oh my god song, then you'll get it cut. Not arguing there. But the most efficient way of getting on albums is through co-writes. So yes, publishers do a lot of co-writes. Sometimes they will organize writing camps for the artist, so they can they have a greater shot of getting those cuts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard a lot of songwriters talk about, songwriting camps and people wanting to put on camps. And one of the interesting things is what people don't realize about songwriting camps is that, number one, somebody needs to fund them, number one, in terms of putting it together. But more importantly, somebody, after the camp is over, needs to be working those songs. It doesn't just, miraculously happen. I see this all the time among people who don't really understand what a songwriting camp is and what its purpose is. So it's interesting when you use that term.
I have my own theory about songwriting camps. If you're going to meet a bunch of songwriters, it's the best thing. If you're going there hoping to write a hit, it's not the ideal creative environment to write a hit song, because there's so many eyes on you that everybody tends to go safe.
Right. And you're jumping from one writer to the next. I mean, I've been in a couple of those, and you're just kind of going in like a cattle call, one into the other room, one into the next room, so it's kind of hard to I guess it's good for the impetus to get something going and then come back to it.
I mean, it's great if you are a up-and-coming songwriter where you're really talented, but you don't have those connections yet. It's great to go and meet people.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, Suzan, because we talked about this at the top of the podcast. Last October, the Music Modernization Act was passed by both houses unanimously. Could you tell us how it will help songwriters and music publishers?
Oh my God, I almost feel like I should go into the detail of it. Well, right now, there are a bunch of laws about how songwriters and publishers license their songs and do business that go back to the turn of the last century, 1909. And everything was really, nothing was ready for digital. And there was a consent decree that was slapped on the PROs. That goes back to 1941. So it's just like everything was so dated. So first, it's gonna bring things up to today's speed. Also, music publishing and songwriting was so regulated. And again, it goes back to the 40s, where ASCAP was the major PRO. Anti-monopoly laws, and so it's very controlled, and nobody ever adapted this control. So that is one of the things that's going to bring the laws up to date. So then there's going to be the way the mechanical rights were collected for digital were all over the place. And again, they were trying to adapt the mechanical rights for albums into the digital. It was not on par. So with the Music Modernization Act, the income that the songwriters are going to make off of digital streaming is going to go up in the next 5 years by 44%, which is a huge deal. Because right now, the digital platforms are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but the creators are not getting their fair share. So the Music Modernization Act is going to bring it to a fair place. And then these are for the songwriters. There's going to be a new Mechanical Rights Society that's going to help independent songwriters also to be on par. And again, metadata. If people don't know you wrote the song, they're not going to be able to pay you.
Exactly, it's that simple.
It's and then there are also other like little changes that are just a little too detailed. I'm not going to go into, but it's a good thing. It's something that songwriters fought very, very hard for. And there's a reason it passed unanimously, because it wasn't anything extravagant they were asking for. It was only fair.
I want to go back to your publishing days for a minute, when you worked for Hit and Run and BMG, and you have experience in this area. And it's the idea that I'm curious, in your mind, how much importance do music publishers place on the team that surrounds a songwriter? manager, attorney, label, if they're also an artist as well. Is that play any level of importance or not?
From 1 to 10, 11.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. So can you elaborate on that? Because I don't think people often think of, songwriters as having a team, but, here you're saying that it's very, very important. Can you talk about that?
Yes, because, again, with the market being in the decline, the publishers don't have as many executives, the manpower. So your team is part of the manpower that they're buying into. Your manager, your co-writers, how plugged in you are. That is part of, they're not signing just the talent. Every deal is a new business partnership. So if your business entity comes with executives, it's a plus. So don't look at yourselves, oh, I'm the poor artist songwriter. No, you are the CEO of your enterprise.
Definitely.
And people are buying into your business.
Precisely. Okay.
Today, with the emphasis on having, quote unquote, the hit single, has this made songwriters more cautious about who they collaborate with today?
Yeah.
Tell us how you really feel, Suzan.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes. They want to know what the other person has done, but they also know that you never know where that hit's going to come from. And that's always been true. So the way I look at it is, if somebody's really talented and tapped in, it's right with them because it's a matter of time. And especially when you're an established writer, you need young blood. So established writers are looking for the young writer who's got a fresh perspective on things, so they can keep updating themselves. But they won't go into the numbers game. They will be able to say, oh, I love what this person's doing. I love what that person's doing. So they'll be selective, but they'll still be open.
You've worked in many markets in music publishing, and it got me thinking, do you think that there are opportunities in the international market that don't exist for songwriters in the U.S.?
Of course, and always have been.
Can you elaborate on that?
So I'm going to look at the U.S. songwriting craft. And as a collective in the U.S., also the U.K., we are if we were cooks, we would be French and Italian, just better. No offense to everybody else. There is a instinctive thing just from having listened to songs, of knowing what it is, what it was, that the US and UK writers just have something that the others don't have. Same way the French and Italian chefs do.
Right, and same with fashion. You can't beat the French or the Italians.
Exactly. There's just a sense for it. And American writers have that sense.
Unless you're Swedish.
Yeah.
Swedish to me are amazing.
Yes,
just amazing.
The Swedes are the Japanese.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Very, very true. Yeah, that's
But again, the Swedes have that unbelievable knack for melodies. They need American lyricists.
Right. They don't have the command of the language. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And English is still the popular music language.
Yes, it's starting to change, though. Slowly, it's starting to change on a worldwide basis, but it is still the dominant language that pop songs are written in.
It is still the dominant language. So the answer is, you're an American lyricist, get in touch with some Swedish melody writers, songwriters. And when people are going to say, where do I find them? SoundCloud, YouTube, they're everywhere. You've got the world on the tip of your fingers on the internet. And if you can't navigate it, you've got bigger issues in being adequately programmed for the 21st century. So I'm not even going to go into how do I find them. You go and find them.
Okay. That's very, very true.
Yeah, let me ask you, Suzan, I want to switch gears for a moment. In 2013, it marked the first year that the 35-year revision clause went into effect. Have you seen many writers taking advantage of this?
Paul McCartney.
Can you elaborate on a little bit on that? Like, you know.
Oh, yes. Well, Paul McCartney had this like very complicated relationship with the Beatles copyrights that he had written, because in the, I think, mid-'80s, Michael Jackson outbid him.
Right, exactly.
He wanted to purchase Northern Songs.
Right.
Michael Jackson outbid him, and he could never own his copyrights back. So he didn't know. I mean, it was a big frustration for him, and he could get his copyrights back in the U.S. I think he got them back a couple of years ago.
Right, but I think for the rest of the world, no.
Not for the rest of the world, but the U.S. is a big chunk of the market.
Right.
So he is the proud owner of his share of the Beatles songs.
Hey Insiders, we hope that you're enjoying our featured interview. Before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. So hey Ritch, tell me a little bit about the Music Business Registry.
Well, what we are, Music Business Registry is the leading contact directory. We publish all of the most current, accurate, and up-to-date contact information for the music industry. We do directories for A&R. We do directories for music publishers. We do directories for film and television music. We do directories of artist managers, and we do directories of music attorneys. And we also sell other publications too, like the Indie Bible Series, the YouTube Bible Series, the Indie Spotify Bible Series, and other things as well. That's what we're about.
So if I wanted to find out, let's say, the music supervisor for American Horror Story, I can kind of go into the Film and TV monthly and find the information that I need there?
Well, we don't list specific shows. What we do list is if you know who the music supervisor is, and you can find that out on IMDb, then you can find their contact information. And we have that in our Film and Television Music Monthly. Absolutely, yes.
That's great. And I hear that we have a discount right now. If you go to musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your first order.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we offer that to all of the MUBUTV insiders.
So insiders, check out musicregistry.com and use MUBUTV10 as your coupon code. Yeah, and I guess what I was asking too, I mean, do you see that trend happening more with acts wanting to take back, I know the Eagles, all these seminal acts that are kind of at that, time where they can be doing this. Do you see that trend continuing?
Of course, why wouldn't they? It's like you have a property that belonged to somebody else. All of a sudden they're saying, hey, it's yours. Here's the thing, you can sell it again.
Right. And I'm sure the record companies are obviously making very lucrative offers to them to keep that catalog.
Absolutely. But it's a new source of income. All of a sudden, something that you sold, you can sell again.
Suzan, I want to ask you about another area of publishing, which we've touched on earlier, which is the whole area of film and TV. And over the last several years, film and TV and advertising, video game synchronizations, they seem to have played a far greater role in the income streams for both publishers and songwriters. And from your point of view, being on the front lines with working with writers and publishers, has this kind of concentrated emphasis on sync driven the price down of what you can charge? Have too many people...
Yes, but that started in the 2000s.
Okay.
That started in the 2000s. It started with Napster. I mean, that's how far back it goes, that all of a sudden when record sales came to a halt, the big white hope was film and TV. And all of a sudden, it went down, 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 and it's now it's at a low. It's at a low because it's supply and demand.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. I was speaking with someone at Sony Licensing on the label side about 4 or 5 months ago, and we were having this very discussion about the rates. And she said, it's so true. She says, I'm here licensing Sony catalog. And she said, and one of our classic, I think it was an Earth, Wind, and Fire track, she said, she was looking on, and she had the computer in front of her, and she had like the history of it. And she said, I see that we licensed this track out to a film in 2001. She said that was like, our system went back to 2001. She said, we got, this amount of money. And she said, and I just licensed the same track, classic song last week. And she said, and it was like 2.5 times less money that she was getting for that classic track today. And she said, that's just the nature of the market. She said, it's not only us. She said, it's the same at Warner's and at Universal, that volume of money that you used to be able to get, you can't do it anymore. There's too many players in the market and too many people willing to, go elsewhere where they don't need your particular thing. And she says it's driven the whole market down.
Absolutely. And there's also the fact that ad agencies don't pay as much money because of the invention of TiVo. Again, 2001, there was no TiVo. So people had to pay, like watch commercials. When people had to watch commercials, the TV channels could charge more. It just trickles down. It just trickles down as to there's more free stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
There's
and then you
more
have a lot of
free stuff.
sound-alike stuff
more.
that people are being contracted for sound-alike stuff. So now that's even driven down things,
Exactly. I don't want to paint a grim image because, hey, there's still so much music everywhere. Why is there so much music? Is that people want music. So it's also the writer's, and artist's job to have some self-respect and not give everything for free. For me, my pet peeve word is exposure. Give me your music for free. It will give you exposure.
Right.
Yeah. Exposure to who? Exposure to
who?
what? Yeah.
For what? What's the end game of the exposure?
Exactly. Yeah, I think we, as creators, have to take more pride in that. I guess, songwriting is an art form. So I think there has to be more of a value put on it. The value has been driven down.
Very, very much so. And especially as more and more people have gotten into it, it's been driven down. And that's part of what you're talking about, too, is, especially the thing like with ads and people not, I guess attention is the hardest thing to get from people today. That's what you were speaking about, Suzan, with regards to the ad agencies and TiVo and people not having to watch ads. And how do I, put my message in front of people? How do I get their attention? And the answer is, no matter who you are or how much money you have or how much power or market share you have, it is harder and harder and harder and harder to do that today.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to when TV first got started, that's all you had. So you had to watch it. Now there's so much options and it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I'm not missing at all the good old days. It's not like, oh, it was better then. No, it's better now. Because as an individual, we have options. There's so many different ways of watching things. As a music professional, we need to adjust and also not lose our soul. If you value yourself, you will be valued. But if you keep on giving your songs for free here and there, yeah, you're going to bring the market down. And it's here's the example I like to give to songwriters who want to give their songs for free. Usually I'm like, give it for $200. They're like, yeah, but I was like, give it for $200. So here's the example I use. I'm like, YouTube. I asked them, I was like, do you have the YouTube subscription? They're like, no, what for? I was like, yeah, because YouTube is free. They're like, yeah. And I asked them, do you have Netflix? They're like, yes. I'm like, do you know that Netflix keep on rising their fees? They're like, oh, yeah, I think they do. I don't know. But you don't mind that they rise their fees? They're like, no, because you're used to paying for Netflix and you're not used to be paying for YouTube. Don't be YouTube. Be Netflix. Charge, even if it's a cheap fee. It's easier to raise your fees than ask for a fee when everybody's used to getting it for free.
Yeah, very much so. And that is very, very true. That is true. The idea of having, some kind of cost, even if it's a low one, on the thing.
Yeah, let me ask you, Suzan, what are the greatest opportunities for growth in the music publishing field that you see?
For publishers or for songwriters?
For publishers.
Well, now with the MMA, hopefully a lot of things are going to, there's going to be more money coming in. Also, a lot of publishers, here's where the publisher is a little savvier than a label, is that publishers with the birth of the recording industry had to transition to a royalty-based business. They weren't selling sheet music anymore. They were getting royalties from records. And it's a transition that the record company's been going through in the last 10, 15 years, where labels are not selling records anymore, and they're going on a royalty base through all the digital platforms. And publishers start doing a lot of, that's why they start calling them more like rights management than just publishers, because a lot of them also have labels and offer the same services, because it's really the same principle. You're getting royalties and you've got to be able to get paid with it. You look at the rights you own, you look at the rights that are used, and you license them. So the lines between sound recording and publishing are blurring, and people try to own both. And publishers are moving more and more into the rights management and the neighboring rights.
You know, a couple of years ago, Suzan, I remember watching an interview with Hartwig Mausch, who's the chairman of BMG, and he spoke to this very thing. He said he was telling the story at Midem about why BMG that exists today, why it was formed. And he said, you know, we realized a long time ago that the model of our music company, which is very much what you just were speaking about, he said, was from another era. He said, we looked to where the music industry, both on recordings and on publishing, was going. And we thought to ourselves as a corporation, rather than try to move this giant beast known as BMG toward the future, we would, you know, break it off. We would break off the label and sell that to Sony, which they did, and break off the old music publishing and sell that to Universal, which they did. And he said, and the reason we did that is because he said, we saw the new business being a micro-transaction business. We did not see it in the way that it was going to be in, you know, the way it was from the 19th or from the 20th century. We didn't see that at all. And he said, and the reason we didn't see that is because we started talking to people who were, you know, our customers, and we asked them, what are the needs you have? And it wasn't, you know, multi-million-dollar deals and big catalogs. It was microtransaction services. It was collecting pennies on this new service that no one's ever heard of. It was like micro licensing. It was all of these different transactions. He said, plus we saw that the market had shifted, like you had just said, Suzan, where publishing and records were not the distinct fields that never crossed paths like it was in the 20th century. He said it was very, very much about, you know, records and publishing being the same. We didn't see a division in that. He said, also, we realized economically, we don't live in an era anymore. I mean, he used this term where a record, to make an album, costs the cost of a home. He said that era is gone. He said it's relatively inexpensive to bring a record to market. He said what is expensive is the time, money, and energy that one must put into marketing, whether you're an independent artist or a BMG. He said that you can't get around. But as far as making the record, this idea of spending, you know, $400,000 or $500,000 on an album, he said that's from another time. So those were all the reasons that, you know, he spoke about why the new BMG existed. And was formed very much for the same reasons that you were talking about. And I'm curious, are you seeing more and more publishers that you are in touch with in your world acting as labels, making, you know, recordings and putting those out for the reasons you spoke of?
No, it's not that they're making recordings, but more and more publishers offer label services to independent artists. Basically, they're like, we'll help you distribute digitally. We will help you with your neighboring rights in the countries where you can get neighboring rights. We will help you like market depending on success and all that. It's, yeah, a lot of people are getting into the rights management of masters. Not so much as to going and owning a master. They usually get a big share of it, and the ownership is, I guess, they don't have the manpower to like A&R. They're like, basically, go make your album, bring it to us, and we'll see.
Right. Exactly. Which is the trend that you're speaking of with BMG and what they've done with label services and in grooves.
Yeah, and Cobalt has their label services, and think Downtown has their label services. I mean, a lot of them are getting into it because why shouldn't they? It's exactly the same principle as administrating publishing. Like administratively, it's the same thing. Somebody's using your song. There's a percentage. You need to register, need to make sure metadata is on. Everybody, that's the pennies come in, and you need to go and get those pennies.
Yeah. And it doesn't make sense for the for the acts to do that kind of business. They get out of these deals. They're out of their deals. They're free agents. Why do I need to go to another? Why not hire somebody, which is like bands like Nickelback, all these other bands that I've been seeing doing these deals, even bands like Iron Maiden that have huge, history. They're going, all their deals are now just label services, for their releases.
And ownership.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And let's face it, the major labels are really signing based on social media activity. And and for some artists, well, for established artists, it makes no sense to have a label because you already have
the established, the label did the legwork for you for the past 10, 15 years or however long they were in their major label system. So yeah, they've already created that foundation.
Exactly. So, but for younger artists who are trending, and the labels could bring out, because here's the other thing is, it depends where your ceiling is. For Nickelback and Motley Crue, there is a ceiling. The sky is not the limit because they've had their time. There's a ceiling, and they can reach that ceiling effortlessly with all the tools at their hands. So why get a label? But for a young artist who's trending, and when they reach a ceiling, it's good to go to a major label so they can pop off that ceiling and go to the next level.
Exactly. And
like
then
a
build a
Bieber.
career. Yeah, right. And then build a career.
I mean,
and then,
I'm not saying labels are pointless. That's not at all what I'm saying. Is there's room to be independent, and there is use for a major label if you want to go that extra stretch.
Right. I guess it depends on the type of act that you are. There's so many more. We've talked about that. Me and Ritch have talked about that, where there's just so many more, artists and acts that don't want to sign deals.
Right.
Because why? All the walls have been knocked down. We can, basically do this on our own, especially if they're gaining traction. Chance the Rapper, perfect example,
Absolutely. However, Chance the Rapper had a lot of funding.
Right. He did. Yeah, no, that goes without saying. But I mean, there is other cases where that trend is happening, especially if their socials are doing really well. They're building on that.
Of course. I mean, it's funny when you started that sentence earlier, when you said there's more and more artists, I thought you were going to stop there because there's more and more artists.
Right, exactly. Well, that's the whole thing now, ever since, the advent of computers, that everybody can do music, but that's the problem. Now we have too many people that probably shouldn't be doing music. I mean, you're getting the glut of everybody now thinks that they're a writer, and everybody thinks
music business used to be that's very exclusive club.
Exactly.
That was very hard to get into.
Yep.
Yes.
That's
now the barrier to entry is
you had room to move.
Right.
You got in, you were in, you had room to move, you could meet, you just functioned. And it's all of a sudden the bouncers left, the doors are wide open. Everybody who wants to go in is inside. When you get in the music business, it's so packed. You actually can't meet anybody unless you manage to work your way in.
It's like the famous thing that you said, Ritch, about the gatekeepers.
Yeah, that line about, the good news, Suzan, about art for artists today is that there's no more gatekeepers. That's the good news. You want to know the bad news?
No more gatekeepers.
Well, there's no more gates.
There's no more
gates. It's
the barrier to entry now is
gone.
like exactly. Anybody can do. I mean, you look at my Instagram feed, everybody's a singer singing, just singing a cappella stuff. And I'm like, wow. And I think that's part of the whole American Idol, The Voice trend
technology to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Precisely. It's very much on that level. Suzan, I want to ask you, we've been talking a lot about various elements with songwriting, with publishing. From your perspective, are there any books on the subject that you would recommend songwriters reading who are interested in, furthering their career? Are there any good
Or media, movies.
Yeah,
anything.
media or movies or books that you think are really, crucial or just, things that they need to be doing in that regard.
So here's the thing. Right now, I would pause any book purchase until the books start including the MMA. Because all the books are talking about the 20th century music business. They're all a little, it's good to know. But right now, none of these books are going to help you on a day-to-day things. But there are a lot of blogs and things about how it's done. So when I talk with songwriters and they're like, so how do I want to get film and TV? How do I pitch my songs? I recommend them to purchase IMDb to find out what are the movies in post-production. I always recommend them to go to your website, Ritch, and get the film and TV guide.
Thank you.
And start figuring it out.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that in the notes. Actually, Randall Wixon, we had an interview with Randall Wixon a few weeks ago, and his new version, the new updated version, I believe, is going to have some of the stuff with what
for the MMA.
I'm sure all
MMA.
of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of them. If you know nothing about music business, I love the Passman book.
Oh, yeah.
That's
because
the standard.
It doesn't dilute. It doesn't drown you under too much information. If you're reading the Passman book and you're not learning anything new, then I like the Brabeck book. The Wixon book is in between.
Right. Well, the only reason why I mentioned it, because he's got a new updated.
Too much. Oh, I can guarantee you they're all working on a new
version.
New version
for sure.
that includes the MMA.
They have to. Yeah, precisely.
And here's the thing. There's going to be, I hope there's one now, and that they're not waiting for 2021 where actually the MLC is going to happen. Because there's still things that you can do until then. For 2022, there's going to be yet another version because we don't know exactly how everything is going to be working. Because I want to have the registration for the MLC, MCL, MLC.
MLC, Mechanical Licensing Committee.
Collective,
yeah, exactly. That's for part of the big thing of the MMA. And they've decided on who's going to, do that.
Yes.
Now it's about execution.
So these are things that are going to need to be written about.
Precisely.
Let me ask you, Suzan, for our audience that are budding songwriters at different levels, what advice would you have for songwriters that are trying to do their thing and break in?
So here's the first thing. If you're looking for security, if you're looking for money, if you are looking for, and if you have a plan B, get out. That's really I think that would be the best advice I can give is get out. Because this is a business that is very difficult with absolutely zero job security. Even when you have your hit song, there's no job security. If you can't go surf those waves, it's not a good job. If you have a plan B, if you're hesitating between doing this and being a songwriter, get out. Keep it as a hobby. It's fantastic to write songs, but as a profession, it's very difficult. So if you are, like I am, terminally diseased with the bug of songwriting and songs, then it's keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep writing. If your songs are good, it's not good enough. They've got to be great. You being a great songwriter isn't enough. You need to have a social network of people because somebody needs to buy those songs. There are less and less middlemen because there's more and more accessibility. Develop your social skills. If you don't have social skills, team up with people who do, either through your co-writers or through a manager, but you need to team up. Post songs on SoundCloud before deciding to release things on Spotify. If you've written 3 songs in your life, that's not your first EP. In order to release your first EP, you need a minimum of 100 songs written that you're going to need to choose 3 to 8 from. Not because an idea and song came to you easily. It wasn't sent from God. It was a great first draft. Keep crafting. I've seen some songwriters saying that song it came to me. I think it was sent from God. There was something magic about it. No, it's your subconscious just that emptied itself. Now it's time to craft it so it's a good song. Keep crafting. Keep being critical of you. If you've had a good idea, write it from any angle. It's like walking in the mountains and finding this great place to take pictures of. Don't try to take that one picture that's going to capture everything. Take the hundreds of pictures you would take from that landscape. Do the same thing. You have something that's important. Write all the different songs about it. Example, breakup. The song you would write 5 minutes before you break up with a person and the song you would write 5 minutes after you broke up are totally different songs. An hour before the breakup, an hour after the breakup, different songs because these are different emotional perspectives. So write them all. Try to flip the things. You're writing a song about you breaking up. Write the same song from you've been broken up with. And just take all the pictures you can because only one of those pictures are going to be really good. Is going to be really good. And the other pictures led you to that great picture.
How can members of our listening audience who want to get in touch with you or who have interest to perhaps work with you, how could they reach you? How do they reach you for that?
My website is my name, SUZANKOC. I know it's not an easy name to spell when you hear it, .com. And you'll have all the information there. There's get in touch with me a page. And it usually takes me 24 hours to get back to you. And it's a beautiful profession. It's always been hard. It's never been easy. It's never been easy. The difference is that now it's more crowded.
Yeah, far, far more crowded. Far more crowded.
But it's never been easy.
That's true. Suzan, I can't thank you enough for joining us and doing this morning. I'm very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritch and Eric, for having me. That was lovely. Suzan. Anytime.
Okay, you got it. Great information for all of you songwriters out there. I've known Suzan Koc for many, many years. I have worked with her for many years. She's really a pro and really knows this stuff. She's, a great teacher. She has worked on the front lines of music publishing. She's worked with writers. She keeps abreast of all of this great stuff. And, she talked about a lot of great things, Eric, that I thought were really, really helpful.
Absolutely.
Like the whole thing of, finding your voice, both musically and lyrically as a writer.
Right.
And I know that sounds kind of obtuse and, out there, but it really is true, It's how, if you look at any of the great songwriters who are working today, and when I say songwriter, what I specifically mean, when you say I'm a songwriter in the music business, what it connotates is that you are a writer who is writing songs for other people to record. You make your living writing songs for others.
Right.
Okay. If you're not doing that and you're doing it for yourself, yes, you're a songwriter, but then you're called a recording artist. There's a difference. You're not writing the material for other people. You're writing it for yourself. And that's a whole different kind of path and thing. This particular podcast today was all about exploring the whole area for songwriters who are looking to write songs for the market. And I just love the way she talked about, finding your voice. And
on both the lyric and the music side.
Absolutely. Who you are. And, really learning that particular aspect of the craft, if you will.
And, talking about the most common mistakes that writers make, and these are ones that we'll harp on over and over on this show, you guys out there that are writing with other people, the minute you guys are done, understanding, getting a split sheet together and said, okay, who wrote what? How are we going to split this? Getting that done, signing up the song and signing yourselves up if you haven't done so already with a PRO, performing rights organization, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and then also making sure that your metadata is on this. We've talked about this already several times on the podcast, where you've got to have your songs with the correct information in there, contact information, everything that you need in there. So if somebody is looking for who did this, they can know, who to reach out and contact on this.
I can't emphasize that how important that is, Eric. It's so crucial because what you need to get, ladies and gentlemen, on this is that this is how you are going to be paid in the future. It's not just about, hoping that someone will find you and your publishing company will handle this. So much more of the business is going independent. And what metadata is it's all of this information that's in the digital file that no matter what platform, no matter what, source, no matter what area, whether it's online, whether it's a streaming service, whatever, you can be paid. And if you don't pay attention to that, and have that information filled out like Eric was talking about, you can't get paid. The other area that's he mentioned was the split sheets, and a split sheet is something that identifies who were the writers on this song and what percentage of the song is yours, what percentage is your co-writers.
Exactly.
Is it 1783?
Right.
Is it,
33 and a third?
Is it 60-40? Is it 60-30-10?
You got to do that from the top, right from the beginning, so there's no arguments later and you're setting yourself up for success and no lawsuits or litigation in the future. So I really think that that's extremely, extremely important. We talked about, is there a certain level of development by writers today? And she talked about, there being solid songwriting, the significant advances that used to happen back in the past.
Yes, when it was a different model.
Right.
She talked about how, in previous eras, music publishers could sign writers, good writers that were solid, and they could get songs placed on albums. And those albums, would sell
2-3 million records, and
they would be paid on the basis of the volume of the records.
I think she made a point that there was one artist that wrote for Celine Dion that was able to pay for the house and still
and put the children
through college.
Yes,
just one track.
And what I want to say about that is that you still can do that today if you are. It's the instances are if you're in the upper echelons and you have a massive, massive, massive hit, like if you were one of the writers on Uptown Funk, for example, or if you were one of the writers on, what was the huge Latin hit?
Despacito.
Despacito. If you were one of the writers on that, or if you were, a writer on a huge Lady Gaga hit, Shallow, for example, there's still money to be made. But the point is that what she was talking about was how those kinds of writers and publishers could make money on them by having their songs recorded on albums. Today, if you have a song that's recorded by Ariana Grande on an Ariana Grande album, but it's not a single.
Right. It might be a good vanity play, but it's not going to pay the bills.
Exactly. There's no money to be made because nobody sells albums anymore. We're not in that business.
We're in the streaming model now, so it's much more different.
We've moved from the copy model to the streaming model, and what she was talking about with the Celine Dion was in the copy model, where every copy that was sold and every play on the radio.
Correct. You're getting your mechanical and your publishing performance royalties.
Exactly. And the thing is that what we have to remember is that very, very, very few people achieved that. Now that pie is for many, 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 many more than it was.
Exactly. You've got more writers on a track.
More writers, and you've got a bigger industry too. You've got more people having those kinds of successes. It was very, very limited before. Only a few people. Writers were this many who got over the wall, so shall we say.
Exactly.
We had this many artists who got deals at, record companies. Now it's just endless.
Right.
So it's a whole different business.
Yeah. And the final point was when we talked about the greatest opportunities for growth, and she talked about MMA, which we talked about with Randall Whitson in another interview, and that there was going to be hopefully more money coming in to the publishers and to the writers. And also about, how they had to transition from a royalty-based business into streaming and rights management, and the lines between recording and publishing that they're blurring.
Absolutely. They have been for a very, very long time. This is something that's been coming for, I'd say probably, 10, 12 years.
Right.
I remember a talk that Hartwig Mausch, who's the chairman of BMG, made in which he talked about why did BMG, the old RCA, give up the old model of the recording and music publishing. They sold off the recording to Sony, they sold off publishing to Universal, and they started a brand new company called BMG Music Rights.
Right.
And the reason they did that was precisely for what you said, because that model of the two is no longer as distinct as it once was.
Exactly.
The cost of making a recording
has dropped down dramatically.
It's dropped down to where the average person, your neighbor, can do that. Many people listening to this podcast can make their own recordings. They don't need a record company to be financing a recording. What's the real challenge today is in that world where everybody can do it.
Is scaling it.
Scaling it, and how do you bring attention to what you're doing? That's where the time, the energy, and, you know...
And they're leaders in that, because BMG's been doing it, one of the first ones, and now they're the kind of like the market leaders in that space.
Absolutely. And, you know, and Cobalt and other people.
I mean, you're seeing a lot of the other major labels now having their own divisions of that. But yeah, it's starting to become more commonplace. But yeah, BMG was in the forefront.
And the most common aspect, which I hope everybody takes away, is the idea that publishing and recording are no longer the two separate and distinct models that they once were, that so many of those aspects are coming together to be far more unified in today's day and age.
Hey Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show over at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes in our space. You can also find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Insider Video Series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. This show would not be here if it weren't for our amazing team, which are the following: interview editors Sarah Nissenbaum and Alex Taylor, show notes and transcriptions by Jani Chang, Nikoka Bodoglo, Lilia Owens, and Sarah Nissenbaum, theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast.